is one of your talking points in favor of TPP, could it be that TPP can increase productivity? And if so, do you have any empirical evidence, is it, for example, part of the PIIE study, that would try to make that case?
Well, so it hasn't been one of my talking points, although the good news is we have Praveen Dixit, who's our chief economist from ITA in the room. So we will look at that and I will ask him that exact question. So I have to admit, I don't know the answer, but thankfully I'm a good deputy secretary, but he's a much smarter economist. So I don't know the answer, but I will definitely ask our team if that's something that should be part of the discussion.
Okay, here and then. It's a very active table for questions.
Yeah,
You just read this out.
Who gave the coffee to the table?
Lundbrack and Bloomberg BNA. You mentioned that Japan is a relatively closed market. When will we know whether TPP has been effective, and what sort of metrics will you use to judge that?
But look, I think you can't just look at one market, right? It's going to be a series of markets, but I do think we will look over the course of time. Obviously, the Commerce Department, we measure very carefully the trade data, and that's something that we will continue to look at going forward, because I think obviously there will be a lot of interest over the course of time, and I suspect the economists in the room will spend a great deal of time looking at what the different trade flows are with each of these countries. I don't think there has been a specific discussion of metrics yet, so I think we need to pass the agreement. But obviously we are going to be looking, and we, the Commerce Department, are going to be working very hard to grow U.S. exports to all 11 of the TPP markets.
Dan Pearson at the Cato Institute. How do you respond to the argument that to some extent the TPP represents an opportunity lost in terms of accomplishing liberalization here in the United States that would benefit businesses that rely on imported components and that would benefit consumers? And I ask this in the context of just a couple examples. The sugar program was protected at great cost, I think, because I think we got less liberalization in agricultural exports into Canada and Japan because of the insistence on protecting the U.S. sugar program. And then on the auto side, the administration seems very proud that for 30 years there's no liberalization at all in the 25% tariff on imported light trucks. And it seems to me like the United States economy would have benefited materially from liberalizing those and many other policies that the administration chose not to. So, does this agreement represent an opportunity lost in terms of accomplishing liberalization that would really be beneficial to the United States economy?
Like I said, I'd say two things. One is a number of the provisions you talked about are statutory. They're not, I'm not sure we necessarily could have actually negotiated.
We're changing the law with the implementing legislation, remember that.
That's true, although Congress will draft the implementing legislation. So, you know, what I would say is I think that Ambassador Froman and his team did a fabulous job of going out and getting a very strong agreement, one that will have huge benefits for the U.S. economy. And frankly, I think they did a really good job under incredibly tough circumstances. You know, having been to, you know, around several of the ministerials, and we obviously had teams working very closely as part of those negotiations. You know, usually you talk about 3-dimensional chess. This was 12-dimensional chess. And so doing this, I actually think they deserve an incredible amount of credit for pulling off a 12-country multilateral agreement in what is, you know, pretty remarkable circumstances of herding all of the cats into one place. So I think instead of focusing on, you know, if we didn't get this or that, which I hear your point about implementing legislation, but that still requires congressional action, I think what I would say is we should really be focusing on all the benefits, and there are a huge number of substantial benefits to the U.S. economy that I think we were able to get out of this agreement in, you know, pretty tough negotiating circumstances.
So I'll take another pass at a question, not seeing any hands up there. E-commerce, the chapter on electronic commerce and telecommunications advanced the ball. I see it from a manufacturing standpoint, not just technology manufacturers, but small businesses that use the internet. Could you talk about some of the provisions in that chapter? Because I think there's perhaps a sense that, oh, that's just about our tech companies and maybe some of the services, but some of those provisions. And if you'd like to, you could talk about that in relationship to what we're trying to do in TTIP and the safe harbor negotiations, if you want to go down that route.
It is a very very timely question. I mean, look, this is, first of all, what was done in terms of e-commerce and free flow of data here is really remarkable. It is really important to be able to, write the rules, A, for such a big block, but B, this then becomes the model for future agreements, which I think is so important. And you made reference to it, but one of the things that I have been most concerned about watching at the Department of Commerce is actually the proliferation of digital protectionism around the world. And, countries using various regulatory or other impediments to really disadvantage foreign countries or to do their own economic development in the form of server localization and data localization and all the things that I think a number of countries have sort of decided, hey, we're big enough, we can demand that you put these things in our country, so we're going to use this as a job development tool. So this is something we see at the department as remarkably important. And, on one hand, you have to balance the concerns of the regulators, which is important. I know that's something, a factor that went into the discussion, the creation of the e-commerce and free flow chapters as part of TPP. But also, the more we bring down barriers to e-commerce, to international trade, and to the free flow of information, the more I think we'll see the benefits of, the great benefits that come from e-commerce around the world. And I think, what's going on in the United States, I think there's a good reason why we're the leading innovators in the world in terms of whether it's internet, the digital space, e-commerce. There's a really good reason for that, which is we have reduced the barriers and made it easier to do. And data localization and the other types of non-tariff barriers that we're seeing crop up around the world are of real concern, because frankly, they're intended either to reduce the growth of American companies, keep American companies out of the market, or not allow U.S. companies to get a foothold in the market. So, I think that the chapters that were negotiated in this regard are actually really impressive and really groundbreaking, because we've set the rules of the road going forward, and that'll become the model which future agreements work off of. You mentioned safe harbor, which it's, with the upcoming day of potential DPP enforcement, it is something we were very hard at work at. And probably there's nothing I spend more of my time on right now than safe harbor. We've got a team over in Brussels, literally as we speak, meeting with their EU counterparts, but working very hard to work through final set of issues between now and Tuesday. And obviously, safe harbor is incredibly important to the businesses who utilize it. Having both protecting the privacy of individuals and in businesses is incredibly important. It's something that we value in the United States, something the Europeans value, but also making sure the data is able to move without impediments and without sort of restrictions that limit it in place. So I think we're going to work very hard to get an agreement by Tuesday and continue to work with the EU. So I just think it's a recognition of what the issues are going forward and we'll face. And just to, in that vein, because the digital single market in Europe is another place where, there is a great opportunity for the Europeans to promote innovation in their own market, but it also presents a potential opportunity. I know a number of companies are concerned about a place for protectionism. So we're working with them on that as well to make sure that, that we're promoting innovation and frankly making sure that data is able to move freely around the world.
Thank you.